After 18 years of pouring my heart into our family restaurant, my parents fired me over a single mistake. Seraphina Martinez had given everything to build their empire only to be discarded like yesterday's leftovers. But 3 weeks later, their lawyer started calling frantically. Then the bank, then the IRS. Something was very, very wrong with the business I had practically run single-handedly. As I watched my parents' panicked faces through the restaurant window, I realized this termination might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. Hey, everyone! Before we dive into this wild family drama, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from today. If you have ever dealt with family business betrayal or workplace revenge situations, you are going to want to stick around for this one. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory, and trust me, you will not see the ending coming. The way karma comes back around in this family revenge drama will absolutely blow your mind. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Seraphina, and for 18 years I had been the backbone of Martinez Family Kitchen, a bustling Mexican restaurant in downtown Phoenix. My parents, Rosa and Miguel Martinez, started this place when I was just 12 years old. While other kids were playing video games, I was learning to balance books, manage inventory, and handle difficult customers with a smile. The restaurant became my entire world. I started as a hostess on weekends, graduated to waitressing through high school, and by college, I was essentially running operations while my parents focused on the kitchen. After graduation with my business degree, I officially became the general manager, though my salary never quite reflected my responsibilities. Here is where things get interesting. Over the years, I noticed some peculiarities in how my parents handled finances. They insisted on maintaining separate business and personal accounts, which seemed smart initially. Rosa handled all the books personally, never allowing me full access to the financial records despite my business education and daily operational responsibilities. When I suggested modernizing our accounting system or hiring a professional bookkeeper, they would dismiss my concerns with phrases like, "We have been doing this for 20 years," or "Family businesses do not need outsiders." The incident that led to my termination seemed minor at first. During a particularly busy Saturday night, I approved a refund for a customer who claimed their seafood paella made them sick. The amount was $200 standard protocol for food safety complaints. However, when my parents discovered this refund on Monday morning, they exploded with unprecedented fury. "Seraphina, this is completely unacceptable!" Rosa screamed, waving the receipt in my face. "You cannot just give away money without our explicit permission." "Mom, it was a potential food poisoning case. We have always handled these situations this way," I replied, genuinely confused by their extreme reaction. Miguel chimed in, his voice cold and calculating. "We have decided that you are no longer suited for management responsibilities. Your decision-making has become reckless, and frankly, we cannot trust you with our business anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. 18 years of dedication, of sacrificing my social life, of turning down job offers from competitors, all dismissed over a standard customer service decision. They offered me a position as a regular server at minimum wage, which felt like the ultimate humiliation. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, my voice barely containing my shock and hurt. "Dead serious," Rosa replied. "Take the server position or find employment elsewhere." I walked out that day, my heart shattered and my mind reeling. But as the initial shock wore off, confusion replaced hurt. Their reaction was completely disproportionate to the situation. Why would $200 cause such extreme panic? Our restaurant generated $15,000 on busy weekends. The first red flag appeared 3 days after my termination. I received a call from Sarah Chen, our longtime liquor supplier. Hey, Seraphina, I tried calling the restaurant, but no one is returning my calls. Our payment is 30 days overdue, and Rosa promised to handle it personally last month. This was odd. We had always maintained excellent vendor relationships, and Rosa was typically meticulous about payments. I explained that I no longer worked there and suggested she contact them directly. More calls followed: the produce supplier, the cleaning service, the equipment leasing company. Each vendor told the same story: overdue payments and unreturned calls. Meanwhile, I noticed the restaurant's social media presence had gone silent, and their normally active Yelp page showed recent reviews mentioning service issues and management problems. My curiosity turned to concern when I drove past the restaurant one evening and noticed significantly fewer customers than usual. The parking lot, which used to overflow on weekends, was barely half full. Something was seriously wrong. The breakthrough came when I ran into David Kim, our former accountant, at a coffee shop. David had worked with my parents for 5 years before they suddenly terminated his services 8 months ago, claiming they wanted to handle finances internally. "Seraphina, I am so glad to see you," David said, looking genuinely relieved. "I have been worried about the restaurant since they let me go. Is everything okay?" "Actually, no. They fired me last week, and now vendors are calling about unpaid bills." David's expression grew serious. "That explains a lot. When they dismissed me, I tried to warn them about several accounting irregularities I had noticed. There were discrepancies between reported income and actual bank deposits, and some expenses seemed inflated or completely fabricated." "What kind of discrepancies?" I asked, my stomach nodding. "Seraphina, I think your parents might be involved in tax fraud. The numbers they were reporting to the IRS did not match the actual business performance. I suspected they were skimming cash and underreporting income, but I also found evidence of falsified business expenses." The pieces started falling into place. The secretive financial handling, the extreme reaction to my refund approval, the sudden dismissal of their accountant. My parents were not just running a restaurant. They were running a sophisticated tax evasion scheme, and my termination was not about poor performance. It was about removing a potential witness to their illegal activities. Armed with David's revelations, I knew I had to dig deeper. This was not just about my wrongful termination anymore. This was about exposing a systematic fraud that had been happening right under my nose for years. The woman who had dedicated her entire adult life to building this business deserved to know the truth about what she had really been supporting. My first step was gathering concrete evidence. I still had keys to the restaurant, as my parents had been too flustered during my termination to remember to collect them. I decided to conduct my own investigation during off hours. Every Tuesday, the restaurant closed early for inventory and maintenance, which meant I would have access to the office and filing cabinets. Breaking into my former workplace felt surreal, but I reminded myself that I was uncovering crimes that had stolen years of my life and potentially cheated taxpayers out of thousands of dollars. Using my intimate knowledge of Rosa's organizational habits, I located the hidden filing cabinet behind her desk where she kept the real financial records. What I discovered made my blood run cold. There were two complete sets of books, one showing the restaurant as barely profitable, which was submitted to tax authorities, and another revealing the true financial picture. Martinez's family kitchen was generating nearly double the reported income. Over the past 5 years, my parents had systematically underreported approximately $400,000 in revenue while claiming inflated business expenses for personal purchases. The falsified expenses were particularly egregious. They had claimed Rosa's luxury car as a delivery vehicle, Miguel's golf club membership as client entertainment, and even their annual trips to Mexico as culinary research expeditions. Most shocking was discovering that my own salary had been reported as significantly higher than what I actually received, with the difference pocketed by my parents while they claimed larger business deductions. But the evidence that truly broke my heart was finding a folder labeled Seraphina Management Transition. Inside were documents outlining their plan to gradually reduce my responsibilities and eventually remove me from the business entirely. This termination was not spontaneous. It had been planned for months. They had been systematically preparing to cut me out while continuing to benefit from my years of hard work and business development. The folder also contained correspondence with a lawyer about minimizing potential liability from former employees and protecting family business assets from external threats. I was the external threat they were worried about, despite being their daughter who had sacrificed everything for their success. I photographed every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence that demonstrated their fraud. But I knew that exposing them would require more than just evidence. It would require strategic thinking and careful planning. These were not just my employers, these were my parents, and taking them down would destroy our family forever. The decision to proceed came when I discovered the final piece of evidence, a safety deposit box key hidden in Rosa's desk drawer. Using the bank information from their business accounts, I traced the box to a branch across town. Through careful social engineering, I learned that the box contained approximately $60,000 in cash and several pieces of expensive jewelry that had never been reported as business assets or personal income. This was not just tax evasion anymore. This was money laundering and asset hiding on a scale that could result in serious federal charges. The parents who had raised me, who had taught me about hard work and family loyalty, were sophisticated criminals who had used our family business as a front for financial crimes. I made copies of everything and secured the evidence in a safety deposit box of my own. Then I did something that changed everything. I called the IRS whistleblower hotline. Speaking to federal investigators about my own parents was the most difficult thing I had ever done. But as I detailed the evidence of systematic tax fraud, falsified business records, and hidden assets, I realized that I was not betraying my family. I was protecting the integrity of the business I had helped build and ensuring that justice would be served. The IRS agent, Janet Rodriguez, was professional and thorough. She explained that whistleblower cases involving family businesses were unfortunately common and that my evidence would likely trigger a comprehensive audit and criminal investigation. She also informed me that as a whistleblower, I was entitled to a percentage of any recovered taxes and penalties, potentially amounting to tens of thousands of dollars. Within 1 week of my report, the restaurant received notice of an immediate IRS audit. I watched from across the street as agents arrived with boxes and computers, beginning the process of unraveling years of financial deception. Rosa and Miguel looked completely panicked, frantically making phone calls and arguing with each other in the parking lot. That evening, I received the first of many desperate calls from their attorney. "Seraphina, this is Marcus Williams, your parents' lawyer. We need to discuss your potential testimony in this audit situation. There might be some misunderstandings about the business finances that you could help clarify." I remained calm and professional. "Mr. Williams, I am no longer employed by Martinez Family Kitchen, and I have no obligation to assist in any way. If your clients have questions about business operations during my tenure, they should direct those questions through proper legal channels." "Seraphina, please. Your parents are very concerned about potential miscommunications regarding business practices. Perhaps we could arrange a family meeting to discuss this situation privately." "No, thank you. I think all communication should go through official channels from now on." The desperation in his voice was unmistakable. They knew they were caught, and they knew that I was the one person who had enough inside knowledge to confirm every detail of their fraudulent scheme. My termination intended to silence a potential witness had instead created their most dangerous enemy, a former insider with detailed knowledge, concrete evidence, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The IRS investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, federal agents had seized financial records, interviewed vendors, and began reconstructing the true financial history of Martinez Family Kitchen. But what I had not anticipated was how quickly news of the investigation would spread through our tight-knit business community, and how many people would reach out to me with their own stories of suspicious dealings with my parents. The first ally emerged from an unexpected source. Isabella Rodriguez, the owner of Casa Isabella, our biggest competitor in the downtown Phoenix Mexican food scene. I had always viewed her as a rival, but she contacted me through LinkedIn with a message that changed everything. Seraphina, I heard about the IRS investigation at your parents' restaurant. I need to talk to you about some business practices that have been affecting our entire industry. Can we meet for coffee? Isabella revealed that my parents had been engaged in more than just tax fraud. They had been systematically undermining other Mexican restaurants through a network of fraudulent reviews, supplier manipulation, and even health department complaints filed under false pretenses. She had documentation of fake Yelp accounts traced back to computers at Martinez Family Kitchen, each account posting negative reviews about competing restaurants while posting glowing reviews about our establishment. Seraphina, they have been destroying legitimate businesses for years, Isabella explained, showing me printed screenshots of the fake reviews. I lost $15,000 in revenue last year after a coordinated attack of false reviews claiming we had food safety issues. I hired a private investigator and traced the accounts back to your restaurant's IP address. But Isabella's revelations went deeper. She had discovered that Rosa had been calling health inspectors with anonymous tips about competitors, resulting in surprise inspections that disrupted business operations. Even more disturbing, Miguel had been spreading rumors in the local supplier network about competitors' financial stability, causing vendors to demand cash payments up front instead of extending normal credit terms. This is not just about tax evasion, Isabella continued. Your parents have been running a systematic campaign to monopolize the Mexican food market in downtown Phoenix through fraud, defamation, and business interference. I was horrified. The parents I thought I knew were not just tax cheats. They were predators who had been destroying honest business owners while building their empire on deception and fraud. Every success story they had shared with me, every proud moment about beating the competition, had been achieved through criminal activity. Isabella was not the only one. Over the next week, I received calls from Marco Santos, owner of El Mariachi Grill, who had mysteriously lost his liquor license after an anonymous complaint about serving minors. Carmen Vega from Azteca Restaurant, who had been reported to immigration authorities despite all her employees being documented. And Pedro Morales from Taco Luna, who had discovered that someone had been placing fake orders for expensive catering events, causing him to prepare food for non-existent customers and lose thousands of dollars. Each business owner had evidence linking these attacks back to Martinez Family Kitchen, but none had possessed enough proof to take legal action individually. Together, however, we represented a powerful coalition with a comprehensive pattern of criminal business interference spanning over 5 years. David Kim, our former accountant, became the technical coordinator of our growing alliance. His financial expertise helped us understand the scope of the fraud and organize evidence in ways that would be most useful to federal investigators. He explained that the pattern of business interference suggested RICO violations. My parents were operating an organized criminal enterprise designed to monopolize market share through fraudulent means. Seraphina, this is bigger than we initially realized, David explained during one of our coalition meetings. The tax evasion was just one component of a comprehensive criminal operation. They have been running what amounts to a protection racket in the restaurant industry. Our alliance began meeting weekly at Isabella's restaurant, developing a comprehensive case that connected tax fraud, business interference, defamation, and potentially RICO violations. Each member contributed evidence documentation and witness testimony that strengthened our collective position. The breakthrough moment came when Carmen Vega introduced us to her nephew Luis Vega, who worked as an IT specialist and had been helping local restaurants improve their online presence. Luis had been tracking the fake review campaigns for months and had developed sophisticated evidence showing the coordinated nature of the attacks. I can prove that the same devices, same IP addresses, and same writing patterns were used to attack all of your restaurants, Luis explained, presenting us with detailed forensic analysis. This was not random internet trolling. This was a coordinated campaign of business defamation orchestrated from Martinez Family Kitchen. But our most powerful ally emerged from within the legal system itself. Carmen's immigration attorney, Rebecca Thompson, specialized in business crimes and had been investigating patterns of fake immigration complaints against Latino business owners. When she learned about our coalition, she offered to represent us pro bono in a comprehensive civil lawsuit against my parents. "What we have here is a classic case of business racketeering," Rebecca explained. "Your parents used their restaurant as headquarters for a criminal enterprise that systematically targeted competitors through fraud, defamation, and regulatory harassment. This goes far beyond tax evasion." Rebecca helped us understand that our evidence could support multiple legal actions, federal criminal charges for tax evasion and RICO violations, civil lawsuits for business interference and defamation, and regulatory complaints to various licensing boards. The comprehensive nature of our case would make it nearly impossible for my parents to defend against all charges simultaneously. As our alliance strengthened, I found myself becoming the de facto leader of the group. My inside knowledge of Martinez Family Kitchen's operations combined with my business education and 18 years of operational experience made me uniquely qualified to coordinate our efforts and serve as primary liaison with federal investigators. The emotional toll was enormous. I was systematically destroying the business I had helped build and exposing crimes committed by the people who had raised me. But every conversation with fellow business owners reinforced that my parents had been destroying innocent families and honest entrepreneurs for years. Their success had been built on the systematic destruction of their community. The moment that solidified my resolve came during a conversation with Pedro Morales, whose family restaurant had been forced to close after repeated fraudulent attacks orchestrated by my parents. "Seraphina, my grandmother, started Taco Luna 60 years ago," Pedro told me, tears in his eyes. 4 generations of my family worked in that restaurant. When we lost the lease because of the fake catering orders and negative review campaigns, my grandfather had a heart attack from the stress. Your parents did not just steal money, they destroyed my family's legacy. This was not about business competition anymore. This was about systematic destruction of families and communities by people who had hidden their cruelty behind smiles and community involvement. The parents who had taught me about hard work and family values had been destroying other families while building their empire. Our alliance had grown from individual victims seeking justice into a coordinated force with comprehensive evidence, legal representation, and federal support. We were no longer just exposing tax fraud. We were dismantling a criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity for years. As federal investigators began interviewing coalition members and examining our collective evidence, the scope of potential charges against my parents expanded dramatically. Tax evasion was just the beginning. They now faced potential charges for business racketeering, conspiracy, defamation, fraud, and regulatory interference. The phone calls from their attorney became daily occurrences, each one more desperate than the last. Marcus Williams was no longer trying to negotiate. He was begging for any information that might help his clients avoid federal prison time. The woman they had fired for approving a $200 refund had become the architect of their complete destruction. Just when our coalition seemed unstoppable, everything fell apart in the most unexpected way. The betrayal came from someone I had grown to trust completely. David Kim, our former accountant, who had become the technical coordinator of our alliance. 3 weeks into the federal investigation, I noticed David becoming increasingly nervous during our meetings. He started asking detailed questions about what evidence each coalition member had provided to investigators, claiming he needed to coordinate our testimonies for maximum impact. Red flags should have gone up immediately, but I was so focused on building our case that I missed the warning signs. The first indication something was wrong came during a late-night phone call from Rebecca Thompson, our attorney. "Seraphina, we have a serious problem. The federal investigators just informed me that someone from our coalition has been feeding information to your parents' defense team. Internal documents that only our group had access to are now in the hands of Marcus Williams." My heart sank. Who would do that? Everyone in our coalition has been victimized by my parents. That is what we need to figure out, and fast. The leak has compromised several aspects of our case, and the investigators are considering whether to proceed with reduced charges or delay the entire prosecution. The next morning, I received a call that confirmed my worst fears. Isabella Rodriguez was frantic. "Seraphina, David Kim just called me asking for copies of all my evidence against your parents. He said the federal investigators needed backup documentation, but when I called Agent Rodriguez directly, she said they already had everything they needed. Something is very wrong here." I immediately called an emergency coalition meeting, but David did not show up. When I tried reaching him by phone, his number had been disconnected. His LinkedIn profile had been deleted, and the accounting firm he claimed to work for had no record of anyone by that name. The truth was devastating. David Kim was not a legitimate accountant who had worked for my parents. He was a private investigator hired by Marcus Williams to infiltrate our coalition and gather intelligence about our evidence and legal strategy. For weeks, I had been sharing our most sensitive information with someone working directly for the defense. The betrayal was sophisticated and calculated. David had researched enough about restaurant accounting to sound credible, and he had fabricated stories about being fired by my parents that perfectly aligned with our suspicions about their criminal activities. He had gained access to our evidence, our legal strategy, our witness testimonies, and our coordination with federal investigators. Rebecca Thompson delivered more devastating news during an emergency meeting. The defense now knows about every piece of evidence we planned to present, every witness we intended to call, and every legal theory we were pursuing. Marcus Williams has filed motions to exclude evidence based on information that only David could have provided. But the damage went deeper than compromised legal strategy. David had been subtly manipulating our evidence collection, encouraging us to focus on certain aspects of the fraud while downplaying others. He had steered our investigation away from the most damaging evidence and convinced us to share information with him before providing it to federal investigators. "Seraphina, I think he was not just gathering intelligence," Isabella realized during our crisis meeting. "I think he was actively sabotaging our case by having us organize evidence in ways that would be easier for the defense to challenge." The psychological impact was crushing. I had trusted this man with the most sensitive details about my family's crimes, and he had been working for my parents the entire time. The woman who had already been betrayed by her parents was now betrayed by someone she had considered a crucial ally in seeking justice. Federal investigators confirmed our worst fears. Agent Rodriguez explained that the leak had compromised several key aspects of their investigation and that they would need to rebuild portions of their case using only evidence gathered independently of our coalition. Ms. Martinez, I want you to understand that this does not mean your parents will escape justice. However, the timeline has been significantly extended, and some charges may need to be modified based on what evidence remains viable. The coalition began falling apart. Pedro Morales withdrew from the civil lawsuit, afraid that his information had been compromised and that continued participation would expose him to retaliation. Carmen Vega decided to pursue her immigration complaint separately, no longer trusting the group's security. Marco Santos remained committed, but insisted on working directly with federal investigators rather than through our coordination efforts. My parents seized the opportunity to go on the offensive. Rosa called me directly for the first time since my termination, her voice filled with fake maternal concern. Seraphina mija, I heard about the problems with your little group of restaurant owners. Maybe this is God's way of telling you that family should stick together. We can work through this situation if you stop cooperating with these investigations. The manipulation was transparent, but still emotionally devastating. Mom, you committed crimes. You destroyed honest businesses and betrayed my trust for years. A private investigator infiltrating our coalition does not change what you did. Seraphina, you are being manipulated by competitors who want to destroy our family business. David Kim was trying to protect you from making a terrible mistake. We hired him because we love you and want to save our family. The gaslighting was sophisticated. They were framing their infiltration of our coalition as an act of parental love rather than criminal obstruction of justice. But I recognized the manipulation tactics they had used throughout my childhood, and I refused to be drawn back into their web of deception. Marcus Williams followed up with his own version of the manipulation, calling to offer a generous settlement that would resolve all issues without criminal prosecution. Seraphina, your parents have authorized me to offer you a $50,000 payment and partnership in the restaurant if you withdraw your cooperation with federal investigators. This could be a fresh start for your family. Mr. Williams, your clients committed federal crimes, and no amount of money will change my testimony about what I witnessed. Consider the reality of your situation, Seraphina. Your coalition has fallen apart, your evidence has been compromised, and federal investigators are reconsidering their prosecution strategy. Taking this settlement might be your only opportunity to salvage something positive from this situation. The pressure was enormous. My case appeared to be collapsing. My allies were abandoning the coalition, and my parents were offering financial security in exchange for my silence. The easy path would have been to take the settlement and try to rebuild my life away from this nightmare. But I realized that accepting their offer would mean that every business owner they had destroyed, every family they had harmed, and every crime they had committed would go unpunished. The betrayal by David Kim had been devastating, but it had also revealed something important. My parents were so desperate to avoid prosecution that they had resorted to criminal obstruction of justice, which was itself a federal crime. Instead of destroying our case, David Kim's infiltration had actually provided evidence of additional crimes, conspiracy to obstruct justice, witness intimidation, and interference with federal investigations. The parents who thought they had sabotaged our coalition had actually given us more ammunition to use against them. The betrayal by David Kim had shaken our coalition to its core, but it also attracted an unexpected ally who would prove to be the key to our ultimate victory. 2 days after the infiltration was exposed, I received a call from someone I had never heard of, but who knew intimate details about my parents' criminal operations. Ms. Martinez, my name is Detective Sarah Chin with the Phoenix Police Department Financial Crimes Unit. I have been investigating your parents' restaurant for 18 months as part of a broader investigation into organized business fraud in the hospitality industry. Detective Chin explained that Martinez Family Kitchen had appeared on their radar through a completely separate investigation into restaurant industry money laundering. While we had been focused on tax evasion and business interference, law enforcement had been tracking a sophisticated network of cash-based businesses used to launder money from various criminal enterprises. Your parents' restaurant has been receiving large cash deposits that do not correspond to normal business operations. We believe they have been laundering money for other criminal organizations while running their own fraud schemes. This revelation was staggering. The tax evasion and competitor harassment were just the visible portions of a much larger criminal operation. My parents had not only been cheating on taxes and destroying competitors, they had been providing money laundering services to organized crime. Detective Chin had evidence that we had never seen surveillance footage of suspicious cash transactions, financial records showing payments from shell companies linked to known criminal organizations, and wiretap recordings of conversations between my parents and suspected money launderers. Ms. Martinez, the infiltration of your coalition by the defense team's private investigator actually helped our investigation. We have been monitoring communications between your parents and Marcus Williams, and their panic about your evidence led them to make several incriminating statements that we recorded. The recordings were damning. In one conversation, Rosa admitted to Miguel that they had been cleaning money for the Hernandez organization for 3 years, and that federal investigators could not be allowed to examine the real books. In another recording, Miguel discussed plans to eliminate the physical evidence and make sure Seraphina cannot testify about the cash operations. Detective Chin also revealed that David Kim's real name was Daniel Kowalski, and he was a disgraced former police detective who had been working as a private investigator, specializing in evidence tampering and witness intimidation. His infiltration of our coalition was not just intelligence gathering. It was part of a criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice. We arrested Daniel Kowalski this morning on charges of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and interference with federal investigations. He is currently negotiating a plea agreement that includes full cooperation with our investigation of your parents. But Detective Chin's most powerful evidence came from an unexpected source: security cameras at neighboring businesses that had recorded suspicious activities at Martinez Family Kitchen during closed hours. The footage showed my parents and unknown individuals moving large amounts of cash and documents in and out of the restaurant during times when the business should have been empty. Ms. Martinez, your parents have been using the restaurant as a front for a comprehensive criminal organization. The tax evasion you discovered was just one component of their operation. Working with Detective Chin, we reconstructed a criminal enterprise that was far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. The evidence included financial records showing over $800,000 in suspicious cash deposits over 3 years, with no corresponding increase in reported food sales or customer volume. Bank surveillance footage of Rosa making multiple large cash deposits on the same days, often just under the $10,000 reporting threshold. Recorded conversations between my parents and known associates of criminal organizations discussing cleaning fees, weekly drops, and percentage arrangements that clearly referred to money laundering operations. Physical evidence from the restaurant showing hidden compartments in the office where large amounts of cash had been stored temporarily. Forensic accounting that revealed the true scope of their tax evasion: over $600,000 in unreported income over 5 years. Documentation of the systematic harassment campaign against competing restaurants, including contracts with Daniel Kowalski for competitive intelligence services that included creating fake online reviews and filing false regulatory complaints. Evidence of immigration fraud, including falsified employment documents for undocumented workers who were paid below minimum wage, while official records showed higher wages for tax reporting purposes. The money laundering charges carried potential sentences of 20 years in federal prison, far more serious than the tax evasion charges we had originally pursued. Combined with RICO violations for operating a criminal enterprise, my parents faced the possibility of life imprisonment. Detective Chin coordinated with federal investigators to rebuild the case using evidence that had never been compromised by Daniel Kowalski's infiltration. The law enforcement case was actually stronger than our civilian coalition's evidence because it included surveillance wiretaps and forensic financial analysis that could not be challenged through traditional defense strategies. Ms. Martinez, your parents' attempt to sabotage your coalition through infiltration actually accelerated our timeline and provided us with additional evidence of criminal conspiracy. Their desperation led them to make mistakes that strengthened our case. Rebecca Thompson worked with Detective Chin to coordinate our civil lawsuit with the expanded criminal prosecution. The civil case would now include claims for money laundering, racketeering, immigration violations, and criminal conspiracy in addition to the original charges of tax evasion and business interference. Seraphina, what we have now, is a comprehensive criminal prosecution supported by multiple law enforcement agencies, independent evidence that was never compromised, and testimony from cooperating witnesses including Daniel Kowalski. Rebecca explained. Your parents' defense strategy has completely collapsed. The psychological impact of these revelations was overwhelming. I had thought my parents were small-time tax cheats who had gotten carried away with competition. Instead, they were sophisticated criminals who had been laundering money for organized crime while systematically destroying honest businesses and exploiting undocumented workers. The woman who had dedicated 18 years of her life to building what she thought was a family restaurant had actually been unknowingly supporting a criminal organization that harmed countless people throughout our community. Every success we had celebrated, every milestone we had achieved, had been funded by criminal activity. But Detective Chin helped me understand something crucial. My decision to expose their crimes had prevented far more damage than it had caused. Ms. Martinez, based on our investigation, your parents were planning to expand their money laundering operations significantly. Your exposure of their activities may have prevented millions of dollars in additional criminal proceeds from being processed through legitimate businesses. The coalition members who had remained committed to seeking justice were vindicated. Isabella Rodriguez Marcos Santos and Luis Vega had not only exposed tax evasion and business interference, they had helped law enforcement dismantle a criminal organization that threatened the integrity of the entire local restaurant industry. As federal and local investigators coordinated their prosecutions, Marcus Williams's desperate phone calls became increasingly frantic. The defense strategy had shifted from challenging evidence to negotiating plea agreements that might allow my parents to avoid life imprisonment. The woman they had fired for approving a $200 refund had become the key witness in a prosecution that could result in decades of federal prison time and the complete dismantling of their criminal empire. The final confrontation came 6 months after my termination in a federal courtroom where my parents faced a judge who would determine their fate. The comprehensive investigation had revealed crimes far beyond anything I had initially imagined, and the evidence was overwhelming. Rosa and Miguel Martinez pleaded guilty to 18 federal charges, including tax evasion, money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and immigration fraud. The plea agreement detailed a criminal enterprise that had operated for over 5 years, laundering approximately $1.2 million while destroying legitimate businesses and exploiting vulnerable workers. Detective Chin testified about the scope of the money laundering operation, explaining how Martinez Family Kitchen had been used as a front for processing criminal proceeds from drug trafficking, human smuggling, and other organized crime activities. Federal prosecutors presented evidence showing that my parents had been paid over $200,000 in cleaning fees for their laundering services. Rebecca Thompson represented our coalition in the civil proceedings where we won comprehensive damages, including restitution for destroyed businesses, punitive damages for criminal harassment, and compensation for lost income. The total civil judgment exceeded $800,000, effectively seizing all assets my parents had accumulated through their criminal activities. But the most satisfying moment came when Judge Patricia Morrison addressed my parents directly before sentencing. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, you used a family business as a front for systematic criminal activity that harmed your community, exploited vulnerable workers, and betrayed the trust of your own daughter. Your crimes were not motivated by desperation or necessity, but by greed and a complete disregard for the law and the welfare of others." Rosa received 12 years in federal prison. Miguel received 15 years due to his leadership role in the money laundering operations. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to their victims and forfeit all assets acquired through criminal activity. The restaurant was permanently closed and its assets liquidated to pay restitution to the businesses they had destroyed. The building that had housed Martinez Family Kitchen now contains a community center that provides resources for immigrant entrepreneurs starting legitimate businesses. Marcus Williams was investigated by the state bar for his role in the conspiracy and eventually lost his license to practice law. Daniel Kowalski received 8 years in federal prison for obstruction of justice and witness intimidation. But the most meaningful outcome was not the punishment of criminals. It was the restoration of justice for their victims. Pedro Morales reopened Taco Luna with financial support from our coalition and federal restitution payments. Carmen Vega expanded Azteca Restaurant and hired several former Martinez Family Kitchen employees who had been exploited by my parents. Marco Santos not only reopened El Mariachi Grill, but also became an advocate for other businesses targeted by criminal harassment. Isabella Rodriguez and I developed a partnership that surprised everyone, including ourselves. We combined our expertise to create Phoenix Restaurant Alliance, a nonprofit organization that helps Latino business owners protect themselves from fraud, harassment, and exploitation. Our shared experience of surviving systematic attacks by my parents created a bond that transcended our previous competition. "Seraphina, what your parents did to you was horrible, but your courage to expose them saved our entire industry," Isabella told me during the opening of our new collaborative venture. "You turned the worst betrayal into the foundation for protecting other families." The whistleblower payment from the IRS exceeded $70,000, representing my share of the recovered taxes and penalties. Combined with the civil judgment, I had more financial security than I had ever experienced as an underpaid manager at my parents' criminal enterprise. But more important than money was the chosen family I had built through this experience. Detective Chen became a close friend who helped me process the trauma of discovering that my parents were sophisticated criminals. Rebecca Thompson continued representing small businesses targeted by corporate fraud, often consulting with me on cases involving family business disputes. Luis Vega became our technical specialist, helping restaurants protect themselves from online harassment and fake review campaigns. The psychological healing took longer than the legal resolution. Therapy helped me understand that my parents' betrayal was not a reflection of my worth, but a manifestation of their criminal mindset. I learned to separate my love for the family I thought I had from the reality of the criminal organization they actually operated. 18 months after my termination, I opened my own restaurant, Seraphina's Kitchen, specializing in authentic Mexican food prepared with integrity and served by fairly compensated employees. The restaurant became a gathering place for the coalition members who had fought alongside me, and we display a plaque honoring businesses built on truth, community, and justice. The opening night was emotional beyond description. Pedro, Carmen, Marco, Isabella, and dozens of other restaurant owners who had suffered under my parents' criminal regime celebrated together in a space dedicated to honest business practices and community support. My parents have never contacted me from prison, and I have never visited them. The relationship ended the moment I discovered the scope of their crimes and their willingness to destroy innocent people for profit. Some family bonds cannot survive criminal betrayal, and I have found peace in accepting that reality. But I learned something profound about chosen family through this experience. The people who stood with me during the investigation, who supported me through the legal proceedings, and who celebrated justice with me became more meaningful family than the criminals who shared my DNA, but betrayed my trust. Today, Phoenix Restaurant Alliance has helped over 40 businesses protect themselves from fraud and harassment. We have developed protocols for detecting money laundering resources for reporting criminal harassment and support networks for business owners facing systematic attacks. The woman who was fired for approving a $200 refund became an advocate for small business integrity and a living example that justice can prevail when people have the courage to expose criminal activity. Every time I see a news story about family business fraud or organized crime targeting immigrants, I think about the importance of speaking truth, even when it destroys relationships with people we love. My parents chose crime over family, but I chose justice over blood loyalty. And that choice led to a more authentic and meaningful life than I ever could have imagined. Have you ever discovered that people you trusted were living completely different lives behind closed doors? Sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most important victories. If this story of family karma and justice served resonates with your own experiences of choosing truth over comfort, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and doing what is right? Drop your thoughts below because your experiences might help someone else facing a similar situation. Make sure to hit that like button if you believe that justice eventually finds its way to those who harm innocent people, and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up to corruption and finding strength in the most challenging circumstances. Share this video with anyone who needs to remember that speaking truth to power, even within our own families, can lead to outcomes more satisfying than any revenge we could imagine. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to justice, and remember that sometimes the family we choose becomes more meaningful than the family we are born into. Until next time, keep fighting for truth and building communities based on integrity rather than convenience.